people, there's a chat box down below or somewhere on your screen. It should be below the pictures. And there's also a Q&A, but if somebody would like to send a question or a chat, just so we know that people are there, that would be great. I'm going to also log in as a participant so I can see. Oh, I see we have at least one person. From Gail, from David, from Holly Harper. Wonderful. I see lots of people are sending. From Dale, people are sending messages. Sherry Weinberger and Dan from Chicago. Wonderful. Great. So it seems like people are on and people can see us. We're now up to 68 people. And what we will do, and one person submitted a question. Sammy is here from very cold Florida where it's 55 degrees and raining.
Rubbing it in.
Rubbing it in, right. So, okay, we're going to start our webinar. The first one is with Rabbi Micha Berger. Many of you know Rabbi Berger. He lives in New Jersey. Many of you have met him at the Kala or practice retreats or from other webinars and programs that we have done. So we'd like to welcome him for our first webinar, which will be an introduction to Pirkei Avot and also on Chapter 1 of Pirkei Avot. There are slides, which hopefully everybody can see the slides as well. And Rabbi Berger, I will let you introduce yourself and let's go. And then at any time, people can submit questions. We'll also have a question and answer period at the end. You can use the Q&A box is probably the best way to do it rather than the chat. Evan, if you could hit the record button to make sure that we are recording.
Already recording.
Terrific, and we are ready to go.
So good afternoon or good evening, depending upon what continent you're in. I didn't see anybody from places where it's still good morning, but good morning to you. It's always a strange thing about a webinar. I'm talking to a group of people and there's no eye contact and no feedback. So please feel free to communicate however possible so I don't feel like I'm talking to myself. So I've been working with the Mussar Institute since the first Kala. I'm one of the two perfect attendance holders. This is my fourth or fifth webinar. You know, I've been on the staff of the Mussar Institute for 14 years now. My own introduction to Mussar was not through the Institute. It was, I had the fortune of having a mentor, a Rebbe in school back in my college years who introduced me to the discipline. From there, you know, Al and I met because Mussar in 19 whatever was not the most popular buzzword on the internet, so we kind of found each other pretty quickly, and from there that grew on to you know, our current relationship. I don't want to spend more time introducing myself. You see my family behind me. They're very important to me. They're also a lot of Mussar work, but that just means they're family. I'm not really saying anything very noteworthy by that. Sorry, nothing particularly distinctive to them about that. But if we could get on to the... Okay, thank you, anonymous viewer. I'm moving my mic a little bit away from my mouth so that you shouldn't pick up the noise. Somebody will let me know if it's still a problem. So we're going to the first slide because frankly I have way more content than time. I'm going to have to figure out exactly what people are most interested in and emphasize those elements of the material. I apologize for the layout on some of the slides. With the last minute snafu that caused the delay in starting turns out that I've used fonts that are not on the computer you're seeing for the slides. So this is a different font set for the Hebrew. The layout changed on us and hopefully everything is still readable, but some of the aesthetics were lost. We may have a line or two that goes off the bottom of the slide. We'll have to work with it. So in any case, let's start. And to start, we'll start with the very first beginning Mishnah of Avot. So Avot is part of Mishnayot, which were compiled in the 2nd century. Israel was under Roman rule. There was a fear that under Roman rule we would lose the continuity of oral tradition. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Rabbi Judah the Prince, had decided that it's time to write down the oral tradition. Even though it loses some of the flexibility and life that you get with an oral tradition, at least we'd have perpetuation of the tradition as a whole. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi took the oral tradition. He took them in little epigrams that we call Mishnayot, and he recorded them. And most of Mishnayot are therefore the things he felt you couldn't live without. So the ideology, he felt, if we lost detail over the years, we could manage. Laws, though, he felt you can't lose details on laws. So the majority of Mishnayot are dedicated to laws, except for the Masechta, the volume in front of us, which is called Pirkei Avot. It was originally, he actually just named it Avot, and which means either fathers or first principles. And both senses work here. And then over time, it was added to the Siddur, and since one chapter was studied every week, it became Pirkei Avot, the chapters of Avot. But Avot is about the big principles, the big picture, and therefore is largely a Mussar text, because even from the perspective of Halacha, Mussar is the first principle that all of Halacha derives from. So even in terms of Jewish law, a book on first principles is going to be a book on Mussar epigrams. Also, as we're about to see, it is also a chain of Avot from our ancestors to today, kind of trying to maintain the continuity of the oral tradition that we're losing somewhat by putting it down onto paper. So Avot begins, Moshe Kibel Torah Sinai. Moshe received the Torah from Sinai. Umasra Yoshua, and gave it over to Joshua. Yoshua Lizakanim, and Joshua gave it over to the elders. Uzakanim Linavim, the elders gave it over to the prophets. Unavim Masru al Anshe Knesset Agdola, and the prophets gave it over to the men of the great assembly. Haim Amru, the men of the great assembly, would say three things. So the men of the great assembly now are really a cusp group of people. The great assembly included the last of the prophets. So people like Mordechai from the Purim story or Ezra were among the great assembly. And they were the last of the prophets, but they were also the first of the rabbinic leadership. They were preparing us for life without prophecy. They lived at the beginning of the Second Temple, so the Second Temple is now being built. They're putting together institutions like the Siddur and the Beit Knesset, the synagogue. Formalized prayer liturgy is coming from them. And the idea of codifying law is really starting with them. They are the people who shift tracks from relying on God, butting in when we're doing the wrong thing to using a rule set to figure out how we're supposed to behave. So they would say three things, and these three things are very related to that role. Hevu misunim bedin. Let me switch to Israeli accent because I think that's more comfortable for most of you. Hevu mitunim badin. Let's be very cautious in judgment. Va'amidu talmidim harbe. And establish many students. Va'asu siyag leTorah, and make a fence around the Torah. And so the first one is very simply, you have to be very careful when you judge people. You also have to be very careful when you interpret law. So that badin means both. That we're dealing with something serious and important, and you have to think things through and not make a flippant decision. Hamidu talmidim harbe, you have to pass things on to the next generation. So therefore have many students. Vasu siyag Torah, and this is the concept of all these rabbinic laws that are set up around the primary law. So the Torah's law is kind of viewed as a cliff, and if you don't want people to fall off the cliff, you put a fence between where everybody is standing and the cliff, so that they don't fall off and make an error. So this is make a fence around the Torah. That's the first Mishnah. It's not, at first glance, very inspiring, but I want to look at it through the eyes of the second Mishnah, so I will ask that we go to the next slide. So Shimon HaTzadik, Shimon the righteous, Hayu Mishiyare Knesset Agdola. He was one of the survivors of the Great Assembly. So he was a younger member who outlived most of the Great Assembly. He was not a prophet. He was not called rabbi yet, only because the title was not coined yet. He is what we would call a rabbi. So, whereas the first quote was by a group of people that included prophets. Okay, that wasn't happy. By a group of people that included prophets preparing for life based on halacha and Torah analysis, as opposed to divine speech. He is the first to be of the new generation remembering life with prophecy. See, he said, Shlosha devarim holam omed. The world stands on three things. This is one of the more famous Mishnayot. Al HaTorah, it stands on Torah. Al HaAvodah, it stands on worship of God, service of God. Val Gemilut Chasadim, and on supporting acts of kindness. And the reason why I translate Gemilut as supporting is because a gamal is a camel. And so as a verb, Gemilut sort of connotates that ability connotates, not English. It connotes the ability of a camel to take up water once and survive for a month. So it's not, Gemilut Chasadim is not giving a poor person $1 as much as it is giving a poor person a profession, so that you're supporting them through kindness. It's a one-time act that has an extension over time in its effects, like the way a camel drinks once and survives over a period of time. Now, you must be wondering about the colors. Don't worry, there's actually a slide about why the weird colors. So there are three pillars that the world stands on. So the Maharal in the next slide, I quote him only in English. The Maharal in the next slide explains what these three pillars are and how they actually stand as pillars. So we're coming in the middle of a long text. So there's a therefore. The godly Tana writes that on one pillar that the universe stands upon is the Torah. For this pillar completes a person so that they can be a finished creation with respect to themselves. So that is Torah. Torah, when we think of Torah, we may think of it as a bunch of material to learn. He's saying no, Torah as a pillar to life is a means of self-completion. It's a very Mussar view of Torah. It's not, do I know the laws of when two people grasp a cloth at the same time? It's interesting. I'm asking myself a question. Yes, so let me finish I have to get used to the Q&A box. I lost my train of thought. So it is not that, if two people grab a talis at the same time, and you could have a whole discussion, who gets priority of ownership? And that is an interesting question in fiscal law, that in the days when all our fiscal decisions were decided by a Beit Din, by a Jewish court, they would have to be able to know and determine. But he's saying that Torah is a means of self-refinement. So it's a way of finishing creation with respect to ourselves. I was asked, what is a godly Tana? A Tana is a a rabbinic figure from the era of the Mishnayot. So in the days of the Amoraim, in the next era, they were the people who are always repeated. These were written into epigrams, as we said. We called these epigrams Mishnayot. In Aramaic, that would mean the term is matnisin, which means repetitions. So the person who was always repeated ended up being called a Tana, even though it really should refer to the person doing the repeating. So the godly Tana means the person who is more connected to God than we are. In our humility, we are projecting a greater closeness to God for those who came before us. And this figure from the Mishnah is therefore being called by the Maharal a godly Tana, a close to God figure of that period. I hope that helps my namesake Micha, who didn't give his last name. So, as I said, it looks like I'm asking myself a question. After that, the Tana, the same Shimon HaTzadik, says on avoda, which was service, and we said it was service of God. For from avoda, from service, a person can be thought to be complete and good toward the one who created him by serving God. So the second pillar is completion in our connection to God. So the first pillar, you notice, is described as finishing our creation with respect to ourselves. And the second is a service of God. So we already have two of three kinds of relationships being described here. And with regard to the third, it is necessary for a person to be complete and good with others. And that is through loving kindness. So the third pillar of Gemilut Chasadim, of supporting acts of kindness, is the loving kindness that connects us to others. So according to the Maharal now, it's not just three pillars as three specific mitzvot. The mitzvah of Torah study, the mitzvah of worship, let's say prayer or service in the temple, and the mitzvah of doing kindness to others. It is three categories of relationships that people are naturally immersed in. We have to relate to ourselves and perfect ourselves. We have to relate to God and perfect our relationship to God. And we have to perfect how we relate to others. So our relationship to God can be, there's different ways our relationship to God can be incomplete. We could be incomplete in not relating to God. We live our lives, we have our pursuits, we make sure we're happy. We might even make sure those around us are happy, but none of it has to do with an eye to God, his plan for creation, why we're here in this world, the meaning that we were made to pursue. And in that sense, we could be incomplete in our relationship to God. But I think what happens more often is actually a perverted relationship to the divine. And this is really what happened with paganism, where our relationship to the divine becomes a way to get what we want out of heaven. So instead of us trying to live to the plan we're made for, and anything good that comes to us is just a natural consequence of living the way we're supposed to, it starts becoming, well, if I do this ritual and this incantation, then Thor won't bring down his thunder and burn down my tree, lightning and burn down my tree. And if I do this, then Mars will be appeased and there won't be war in our country. And this attitude toward the divine, where it's not a sense of duty or a sense of grand image for how I am to live, but it's a means of manipulating heavenly forces. It is a very incomplete relationship with the notion of divine and the kind of world that we associate with heaven, the world of meaning and having a higher and a spiritual life. So we could harness our physical life in service of the spiritual, and sometimes we get so caught up in the physical life that we harness the spiritual world to try to get our physical needs addressed that way. It also happens often in a frequent modern equivalent of those who sort of think that because science is so fantastic at explaining the empirical world around us, there's no role for religion. Coach Hank is asking a great question. Let's shelve it because I'll approach my slides in order. I see your question and I will be getting to it when I get there. It's on the agenda. So if we could go to the next slide. Jeffrey. Okay. Okay, I think you went the backwards way. Next slide. No. There. That's it. So you must understand that these three pillars parallel three things in each person: the mind, the living soul, and the body. None of them have existence without God. The existence of the soul is when it comes close to Hashem by serving Him. Which makes sense. I mean, this is kind of intuitive. How do we get nourishment? How does the soul get nourishment and sustenance? Well, it's a part of us closest to the divine. So it gets directly by serving the divine. From the perspective of the mind, a person gets their existence through Torah. For it is through the Torah that a person attaches themselves to God. So the soul attaches emotionally, experientially to God. We serve God, we experience the divine firsthand. We immerse ourselves in prayer and we could, in a sense, feel God answering us. The intellect studies God, thinks about God, tries to get a handle on God's midot, and emulates God. And that more intellectual relationship with God is the universe of the mind and the pillar that we call Torah. Last is the body. And the man gets to the body, a person gets their existence through loving kindness. For the body has no closeness or attachment to Hashem directly. Sorry, I'm throwing indirectly myself. Just that Hashem is kind to all. So the body gets sustenance because God expresses loving kindness. The body does not directly relate to God. The body relates to God because it's a vehicle for the mind and the soul. God is kind to our bodies and therefore sustains us physically. When a person performs kindness, God is kind to the person and so gives him existence. So that is this is explaining now the notion that these three pillars are the pillars that the world stands upon. Existence depends on our maintaining these three pillars because there are three elements to what it is to be human. There is the soul, the body, and the mind. So the soul is directly connected to God and therefore serves God directly, and that is how it gets its sustenance and its existence is justified. The mind has to work at emulating God and learning God, sort of trying to get into the mind of God, so to speak, and thereby attaches itself through Torah. And the body, because it's the vehicle by which we reach other people, God is kind to us and kind to other people by letting us act in this world. Let me explain what I mean. You would think that the closest connection we get to other people is on the level of minds, right? When we understand where they're coming from, that is when we really feel most connected, right? I gave the example of giving a homeless person food, perhaps because I work through Times Square on my way to the office 5 days a week. So that example comes to mind very readily. I've met many homeless people on the way to work. But really we feel most close when we connect on an intellectual level. So you might think that the world of the mind should be the world of people, because that is what makes us more than just another mammal. But the truth is that we don't connect to people directly on the level of mind. We can't communicate to another person We're not psychic beings. We don't communicate mind to mind. Without a body, we don't have speech. Without a body, we don't have books. You can't read the book. You can't write the book. There's no symbol system, hand gestures that we could use without going through the physical world, from my mind through the physical world to the other person. So God created a physical world to allow us to connect to others. So there are 3 worlds, and in each world enables a different kind of relationship. We have the spiritual world. I'll call it heaven because that's the normal name. In heaven, we have the ability for our souls to relate to God. Then we have the physical world, which gives us the ability to relate to other people and therefore justify our existence on a physical level, right? There's a famous saying in Yiddish, however famous anything in Yiddish still is, that's attributed to Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, that says that my spirituality goes as far as my soul and your stomach. Right? Another saying that they say in the name of the Chavetz Chaim, which makes a similar point. So many people will stand outside of the synagogue and say, we need a 10th person for the minyan. We need a 10th for the minyan. But how many people stand outside their dining rooms, their homes, when they're making a meal and say, we need a 3rd person for Birchat HaMazon. Please come eat. We need a 3rd person. The same way, our spirituality is directly to our souls only when we're talking about our souls. It's very easy to correct somebody else's soul and to worry about our stomachs. Spirituality is not like that. The universe of heaven is about our soul, and the spirituality of on the physical plane is about your stomach, not mine. So Dan Sobel asks the wonderful question, if Hashem is kind to all, how do we explain when bad things happen? That is a fantastic question. An hour is not long enough. Never mind as a tangent question, as a webinar on why bad things happen, or even why bad things happen to good people. It's really an unanswerable question. The best we can say is to take it on faith that when bad things happen, it is in order to avoid something worse. And living in the shadow of the Holocaust, I know how meaningless of an answer that really is. But the idea would be that the person who is poor is capable of spiritual refinement in the context of poverty, but maybe can't withstand the challenge of wealth. So God never gives them wealth because as a human being, they're better off, even if on the physical level of happiness, they're not better off. Or if God were good to everybody and there was nothing in the world broken for us to fix, we would never have the ability to be people and fix things ourselves. So it's kind of like watching your 3-year-old fall. 3-year-old's too old. Watching your 1-year-old fall when they're trying to learn how to walk, and you just sit there and watch them fall, because if you always caught them, they would never learn to walk. And God has to do some of that. But that's just touching on possible pieces of an answer. The bottom line is, the question of theodicy will be with us till the day we die. God will explain it after we die. I'm in no hurry to get the answer. And that's really all we could say on the subject, with any intellectual honesty. Lisa asked, that is to say that kavana is not enough, correct? I don't know. I'm not getting the intent of your question, so if you add to that, it will be helpful. But it is true that planning to be a nice person and not actually ever giving to somebody is not enough. Also, planning to pray and not actually praying is not enough. There's something to be gained. There's a refinement to be gained by going through the actual exercise, experiencing doing it. That kavanah, that thinking about doing it or thinking about how we should be doing it, is just not a compensatory thing. But again, Lisa, I'm not 100% sure what you're getting at. So if I didn't really touch on what you were trying for, I'm going to need more explanation. Jeffrey, next slide. I think this is the fun slide. Okay, so this brings up, I was wrong. So I said I was going to revisit the first Mishnah in light of the second one. And notice I color-coded the 3 items. So the men of the Great Assembly, remember, were busy worrying about how to establish a system of Torah study without God chiming in through prophets. So they stated the same 3 elements, but they stated it using, with a focus on the challenge of their era, of their generation. So they are talking about the challenge of establishing a rabbinate, or what we would later call a rabbinate. As I said, the word didn't exist yet. So having mituna medin is about zihirut, is about awareness. It's about a certain mental enlightenment. You have to be careful and cautious in one's thought, not jumping to how you judge another person, not jumping to how you understand the material. Spend time and to think with nuance. So in that sense, it is the Torah, the world of the mind, element of their 3 concerns, because they are telling you how to think. Ha'amidu talmidim harbe, well, it's great to preserve the Torah, but we're supposed to survive as a community. And therefore, it's not just enough to know the right thing. You have to be out there teaching as many people as you can, reaching out to others, helping them get their first leg up. So in the world of Gemilut Chasadim, in the physical world, you have to spend that time talking and writing and teaching. That we were talking about this establishing and sharing the Torah. And the third element, Vasusiyag Torah, is make a fence around the Torah. We said because this fence is the rabbinic laws that keep people from stepping on the actual laws that God had started with. So it's a matter of developing an attitude of fear of heaven. And I'm going to go on a little detour here because I think it's important. When we talk about fear of heaven, we're not talking about fear of punishment. We're talking about fear of sin itself. The Mesilat Yesharim, don't remember what chapter, but it's the beginning of his discussion of yirah, of awe, of fear of sin, if you want to look it up. He makes a very strong point about this distinction. It is not a fear of doing the wrong thing because God's going to zap me. It's fear of doing the wrong thing because I love God and I don't want him to zap me. Nope, sorry, that went the wrong way. I love God and I don't want to offend him. It's the difference between the husband who doesn't want to do the wrong thing because his wife is going to yell at him, and the husband who doesn't want to do the wrong thing out of love for his wife, and he wants her to be happy. And pursuing her happiness is a motive in itself, and a source of fear and awe. Awe of his wife is a source of fear of doing what would bother her. So that is the third element, and therefore, Asusiyag Torah, having the fear of doing the wrong thing, is a sense of being aware of God's presence and knowing that every move you make matters in our relationship to God, and therefore we have that care of creating fences around the laws. But they were actually discussing the same 3 elements. It's not a coincidence that both were talking in terms of 3 elements. The thing is, even though they were raising 2 very different topics, they're raising them in the same 3 divisions as each other. Again, unsurprising, since Shimon HaTzadik was among the survivors of this group. He knew what his peers were aiming at. In fact, you will find through Avot, many Mishnayot are various rabbis giving 3 elements of advice. And the element of 3 comes in for a very fundamental reason about the human condition. If we could go to the next slide. So, why 3? Now, this is Kronk. He is a character, for those of you who do not have children from the right era, He's a character in The Emperor's New Groove. I was really looking for Fred Flintstone in a similar situation because that speaks more to my generation. But this picture was all over the net and very easy to cut and paste. So it's Kronk it is. Now, generally, when we see ourselves in a conflict, right, we think of one side pulling us toward the good and one side pulling us toward the evil, right? And therefore, you think of these two beings and you're caught on two sides. But if you notice, and in this picture, there are three copies of the same face. In other words, when I'm caught between my Yetzer HaTov, my good, the positive element drives in my character, and my Yetzer Hara, the negative drives in my character, there's still an I who is caught between them. And therefore, there's three people there. Can we go to the next slide before this gets too silly? So the question is, where does that third element come from? And this is a relatively famous piece from Strive for Truth from Michtav Me'Eliyahu. He talks about the Bechira point, the decision point, the point at which a person actually experiences free will. He says most decisions are not made based on free will. Well, let's use his words. Before the advent of modern warfare, sorry, my words, when two armies are locked in battle, fighting only takes place at the battlefront. Territory behind the lines of one army is under that army's control. Little or no resistance need to be expected there. The situation is very similar with regard to free choice. Everybody has free choice at the point where truth meets falsehood. But the majority of a person's actions are undertaken without any clash between truth and falsehood taking place. Most of our decisions are not at the battlefront, where the force is saying follow truth and the false is saying follow convenience and creature comfort and making up excuses for ourselves actually meet. So a person, hopefully this is us, walks through a store, sees a watch they like. It doesn't cross our minds, again I hope, to walk over and steal it. So we don't really call it a free will decision. It happens pre-consciously without any real free will decision making going on to decide to do the right thing and not really steal. Free will is exercised and a valid choice is made only on the borderline between the forces between good and the forces of evil within that person. So none of us, let's say, would steal from the store if we passed that gorgeous watch. But those of us in the U.S. are currently getting a lot of forms related to our taxes right now and are filling out our 1040s. And I apologize to those who may be getting lost because they don't work in U.S. taxes and 1040s and so on. But the same person who wouldn't steal the $25 or $125 watch might be perfectly willing to steal $125 on their taxes. Because for them, that is where the free will line is that we have to decide which side we're going to listen to. Now, what that means is that conscious thought really only happens when the two ends are in conflict. So when our spirituality and our search for meaning is there opposed to our physical side, that is really when the middle world wakes up. And when we get that conflict between should I be doing the meaningful thing or doing the mammalian thing, right? That's when the middle world opens up and we get this world of mind. So there's an entire world of thought, of imagination, that exists just in the space between our ears that comes only because we live in those two other worlds. And so from the growth, see, what ends up happening is that therefore Torah ends up a derived concept. Because what does it mean to be perfect with respect to ourselves? Well, it means to emulate God, to act like God, to have God's priorities. But God's priorities are that we relate to Him and we relate to other people. So perfection with respect to ourselves is perfection in our ability to be both perfect in the physical world and connecting to others, and perfect in the spiritual world and connecting to God. And so that's why the mind is sort of only exists when the two worlds collide. This is also, by the way, one sees studying psychology, there's always a threeness. There's always a dialectic. How's that for a fancy term? There's always a conflict between two opposing theses. You got your thesis and your antithesis. They come into conflict. And when our lives are really mostly not about reaching the answer, like why do bad things happen, it's with grappling with the question of why bad things happen. Meaning comes from working out the process of working our way toward a solution. Not every problem actually do we ever reach a solution. Not every problem actually has a solution that's within human reach. Next slide, please. So I want to talk about anava. And you might think there's a total switch of topic. Don't worry, I tie it back. So anava is usually translated humility. I think it's far enough from humility that I didn't feel comfortable with the way the slide originally looked, and I added quote marks around the word humility. So anava, I will call anava just because I don't like any of the English equivalents. Dr. Alan Marinis, who's the founder of the Mussar Institute, defines it as limiting oneself to an appropriate amount of space while leaving room for others. So anava is not humility, because humility, we just think of limiting ourselves. We don't think of that appropriate amount of space. We don't think of the fact that it is not humble to, it is not anava to be shirking from jobs we could be doing by saying, who am I to do it? It's so beyond me, right? The Torah actually describes Moses as the most modest person who ever lived. And Moses copied those words down and didn't complain about them. There are places where, like in the first verse of Vayikra, where there's a tradition to write the Aleph of Vayikra small, because Moses didn't want to say God called him. It sounded too pretentious. There are no traditions like that about this verse, because to say one is an anav means to take the appropriate amount of space while leaving room for others. So anava is usually understood as from the root inui. To give you an idea what inuyim are, I wrote here to suppress, but there are 5 inuyim, 5 ways that we suppress our physical drives on Yom Kippur: eating, drinking, sexually, bathing. I'm not going to bother trying to think of the list because we're already running low on time. And so you could think of anava as a suppression, the way we suppress these physical needs. But anava is also related to the root la'anot, to answer. It's to respond. So anava is therefore also while leaving room for others. My sons are into basketball. You can't see how tall I am because the screen is rather narrow. But at 5'3", I'm not really into basketball. But my sons are. And I explained to them anava by giving a team player metaphor. You got the guy who wants to win, but he wants to get the credit for being the winner. So he hogs the ball and he showboats and so on. The anav, that is the Baal Gaiva, that is the egotist. The anav is the person who is capable of sharing the ball and being a team player. In that sense, it's an emulation of the Kabbalistic concept of tzimtzum. This notion that God created not by making things, but more like by carving, by pulling out and making room for other things to exist. So that Moses saw Moshe was Moshe, the greatest of all, because he was able to relate to God in this form of tzimtzum, in this really subtle way of understanding creation. That God is pure potentiality. White light could be anything. And he created by putting a slide in front of the white light and letting some colors through and other colors not go through. And that kind of tzimtzum, that kind of constriction gave room for us to exist. We, as part of the answer I had given Dan about why bad things happen, that sometimes God can't solve all our problems because he needs to leave us room to solve problems ourselves and have the joy of being creative, solving beings. Again, understanding that in the shadow of the Holocaust, none of these answers are really entirely satisfying. So in that sense, anava is tzimtzum. Now notice what anava does. Next slide, please. Anava is how much room we take in the space, thereby allowing us to connect to others. So it is, we discussed now that a person lives in three worlds, right? We have the world of heaven, where we could relate to God, the world of earth, where we could relate to other people and make things better for other people and improve the world for the next generation, as the men of the Great Assembly put it. And we have the world in between, the world of our mind that grows out of living in conflict between these first two worlds, where we refine ourselves and our ability to contribute in those two ways. By not taking up too much space, anava, we leave room for relationships. So we could see the world of heaven as a place to get our needs met, right? To cast the magical incantations that would get dew from heaven and the fat of the land, not because God wants to give us gifts, but because we manipulated the heavenly forces into getting these gifts. Or we could see the physical world as a place of gluttony, and sexuality becomes a way to be satisfied and not a way to satisfy another and build a connect. Sexuality is very much in line with the theme I'm trying to explain in the Maharal. Because sexuality could either be, I take up too much space and the physical world is all about my gratification, or sexuality could be addressing somebody else's need and building a connection to another, so that through the physical world, right, I have a bond to another person. And that decision of how I relate to each world, a place that I'm supposed to fill and address my own needs, or a place where I'm supposed to draw back and connect to others, which ends up being a more fundamental need in the long run. That is exactly the Maharal's vision of these three pillars and the structure of the human soul. Amar of Chelbo, Amar of Huna. Now we jumped forward a few generations. This is in Tractate Brachot. We're no longer not quoting Avot here. This is off page a little. Kola kovea makom letfilato. Anybody who has a set place for prayer, Elokei Avraham be'ezro. The God of Abraham will be his help. Ukeshemet, when he dies, omrim lo. A anav, where is that modest person? A chasid, where is that pious person? Talmidav shel Avram Avinu. This was one of the disciples of our ancestor Avraham. Next slide, please. When you give a class, you should remember to hit mute on your own phone first. So who is the honest person? Notice I color-coded again. Green, that is the world of Torah, because humility is knowing your place. It's being whole with myself. A Hasid, who is the pious person? Well, that is the world of worship. That is the world of spirituality. And Mitamidav shel Avram Avinu, our forefather, the ancestor Avram, is associating our tradition with chesed, with loving kindness. There's a verse where we ask for redemption, and we ask God Titain Emet LiYaakov, give truth to Jacob, chesed LaAvraham, and kindness to Abraham. And the reason is because the greatest challenge and issue that Jacob dealt with in his life was truth. He tried to be a man of truth and repeatedly needed other strategies. And Abraham was the man of loving kindness who established an inn and was running around right after his surgery right after his circumcision to feed others. And we see him as he not only discovers God, he's not the first to discover God. Noah and his sons knew about God. Melchizedek, the king of Salem, knew about God. He's the first to go preach and try to elevate other people out of barbarian paganism, is the best I could describe the Middle East of 4,000 years ago, 3,500 years ago, into some kind of ethical monotheism. Because to him, it was Hamidu Talmidim Harbe. It is establish many students, as the men of the Great Assembly said it. If I have a truth, I have to share it with others because I don't want them to miss out. And that loving kindness of Abraham is the world of kindness. Just to explain my color coding, because I'm very proud of myself. In the symbology, according to Rav Hirsch, in the symbology of mitzvot, the colors connote something. In fact, if you look at the Torah, there are only 5 words for colors: white, black, blue, green, and red. So white and black will take off the table because they weren't viewed as colors. And the 3 primary colors, blue, green, and red. In fact, the Talmud has problems sometimes. Do we mean yarok as yellow, or do we mean yarok as green? Because when you divide the entire color wheel into 3, you get a little ambiguous. But there are only 3 words in all of Tanakh for all of color. So when the mitzvah involves greenery, plants, it's about personal growth. Generally, the mitzvah connotes personal growth. Like tzitzit, which does not contain a plant, but actually the word means seedling, is understood by Rav Hirsch as being a clothing that teaches you about growth and reminds you that clothing is a uniform, and a uniform is about having an office and a station. Blue is the color that is closest to the sky, and it involves worship. When a mitzvah has blue, we think of heaven, we think of spirituality. Red is earthiness. And when you have a mitzvah like the red heifer, which deals with, in the days of the temple, one would need a red heifer to purify in order after encountering death, because you purify after encountering a body with no soul. So red sort of symbolizes the world of the body. So when I needed to color code, I pick green for the quotes that involve the mind, the pillar of Torah, blue for the world of worship, and red for the world of loving kindness. So I was proud enough of that cleverness to want to mention it. Next slide. So there's a Rashi that relates these 3 pillars to a totally different part of Judaism, the temple. So in the Tabernacle, because he's commenting on he's commenting on the original construction of the Tabernacle, there are 6 utensils in the Tabernacle and in the temple. 3 of them happen to have crowns on them, little ornamentation around the top. I'm doing hand gestures that are off the edge of the screen. Like a gold rim border around the top. That the term for it in Hebrew would be crown. The altar, the ark, and the table of showbread. The altar is where sacrifices were brought, and therefore the crown of the altar represents the crown of worship, because we are trying to give a gift to God. Whether or not God needs animal gifts and so on, there are times when in the loving relationship we need to give. And so there's this institution of sacrifices to sort of give us an opportunity to give God something, whether or not he needs to decide. Guarantee you my wife doesn't spend nearly as much time looking at the flowers I buy her as appreciating just the fact that I bought her the flowers. And in that sense, that's the altar is our relating to God. And that in the Jewish community was given to Aaron and his descendants. The ark That's not the ark. The table was given to David. There's a typo on this slide. The crown of the table had 12 showbread on it, one for each tribe. So it had to do with prosperity. It had to do with supporting others because each showbread held up the you could go to the next slide. Each showbread held up the next one. So you had these three. So you had the relationship with others, supporting others, which is the job of a king, or political leadership, to take care of the needs, of the physical needs of the community. And then the third one was the crown on the ark, which had the 10 Commandments in it. The original manuscript of the Bible was of the Torah. Moses' manuscript was stored alongside it. So obviously that was the pillar of Torah, which is given to everybody. And there were another 3 utensils which didn't have a crown. The menorah, which had the light of wisdom, 7 branches for the 7 wisdoms. So it's the world of thinking. It is not Torah in specific. It is not self-refinement in specific. It is it is everything from music to art to humanities to there is music and art, to mathematics and engineering and the things I ended up majoring in, because it's the 7 branches represented in the old world, the 7 muses, the 7 wisdoms. It's the world of thought. The bronze altar where the animal was sacrificed is the world of worship, as opposed to the gold altar, which was the idealization of worship, where you didn't even sacrifice the incense altar. You didn't even sacrifice a physical object. It was entirely me and God. Here it's the world of worship. The wash basin, where the priest would come to wash off before doing service and purify themselves. It's getting rid of this world, preparing to service. It's getting rid of that fascination with physicality and being able to relate. So you had 3 objects related to anava in the sense of inui, suppression of my own drives, and the 3 crowned utensils, which represented anava in the sense of la'anot, to connect, to leave that room for others, an imitation of tzimtzum, to have relationship. So it ends up being there's a mastery of each kind of relationship being represented in the temple and in the tabernacle, and a perfection of the 3, and a representation of how we relate to the space, and making sure that the space becomes a tool that we use, and not a tool, and not our drives for that connect us to that space, not taking us over. We need an ego, because without an ego, we don't perform. But if we become about ego, we lose meaning. So all of midot work, all of Mussar, can therefore be viewed as being in one of these 6 categories. When we relate to zihirut, to awareness, right? Awareness is what? It could be either making space or it could be relating. Well, awareness is making space in what plane? In the plane of Torah, in the plane of self-refinement. Zrizut, right? Zrizut could be applied different ways, but I could now start viewing, do I need Zrizut in all spaces, or do I need Zrizut in how I connect to God? Maybe I need Zrizut in how I connect to other people. Maybe I need Zrizut in how I follow through on working on myself. So you have these 6 boxes in which we can put all of our work and give structure to our Mussar in a way that is perhaps orthogonal to the ways that we've been discussing, that we generally discuss in Mussar work. There are actually plenty more slides, but at 1:02, I think I've even used up my QA time. I thank you all. Any questions?
So let me unmute myself. This is Jeff Agron again, and I want to thank you, Rabbi Berger, for a wonderful presentation. These slides, all of them, including the ones we didn't get to, will be sent out along with a link to the recording. Let me just go to one thing. I'm going to tell everybody about an upcoming event that we have. Actually, a couple things. So this week you will receive from us information about the next webinar and a link to register for that. As well, let's see if I can get back to the slides. In the meantime, if anybody has any further questions, we can take just a few minutes and do that. If anybody has any questions, they can put it in the Q&A. We can take just a few of those. I think one just may have popped up if you want to check it.
Okay, let's see. Okay, yeah. Thank you, Sherry, for the. Samuel asked for the 6 boxes. So I was saying there's the world of heaven, which means which I was using to mean our pursuit of meaning and spirituality in and of itself, as opposed to trying to impose our own meaning. Anger comes when we try to impose our meaning in the world and it doesn't fit. That's why it's so related to frustration, and why our sages liken anger to idolatry. It's an idolatry of the self. The world should be running according to my plan, and it's not. When you impose your meaning on the world and it doesn't work, that's when we get angry. So there's spirituality, both the pursuit of meaning and the frustration of anger, and then there's relating to God. On the second plane, there is the world of our minds, which should be a place where we work out the conflicts and refine our ability to work out the conflicts. And then there is perfecting ourselves. But it can instead become the world of ego. So you have, again, it could be either working on being too egotistical or too modest, or it could be the world too modest being giving up and not contributing what we can, or it could be the world of how we relate to ourselves and perfect ourselves. Similarly, the bottom boxes, you have the physical world, and if we're not careful, it could be a world of gluttony. It could be a world of turning people into sexual objects. It could be all about laziness, which is another real physical need, because it means I don't put in any drive, any exercise. Or it could be a world where I could use that physical world to bump into other people and encounter and make their world better, and use those tools to give them their creature comforts, or to communicate with them and relate to them ideas from the worlds of worship and the worlds of thought, because I can only communicate with them on the physical plane. So that's really sort of the way things work. Similarly, the top box, I'm sort of describing things in terms of, we take from God through ourselves into the real world, and that's where we connect to others and allow them to have more. But it's also true the reverse. We try to take this world and bring things up to God. So the world of heaven, the world of spirituality and meaning, also is a means of perfecting this world, because I could see, food as being a creature comfort. I could see food as a way of having the energy it takes to do something meaningful. But that was sort of the 6 boxes. There are 3 pillars, and each pillar is a space, heaven, mind, this world, and each pillar gives us opportunity for relationship, God, ourselves, and people. So those are sort of the 6 boxes. If I deal with Rizut, if I deal with not that many midot actually cross boxes. Like yirah is obviously about meaning. It's being in awe of being in contact with something important. But it gives us we could sort of say which area are we weak in. We could be weak in self-control and therefore take up too much space in all three boxes. You could find somebody who's very, very into prayer and also overweight. Sorry, Judith. What I'm saying was an answer to a question, so it wasn't really. We didn't put the slide up. There is actually a slide that relates to it, but I was doing Q&A, and therefore there was no slide up. But since we do have the next program up, let's discuss it.
Well, this is actually I will send out all the slides so everyone will have the slides. So this is not the next webinar. This is actually a program that we have in March called the Jewish Spirituality Challenge. What do you need? It's a global day of learning, which will be done by webcast or videocast like this. And there will be groups all over the world meeting in synagogues or people's homes or JCCs or other places. You can find out more by going to our homepage, mussarinstitute.org, and there's a box there for you to click to find a local group. We'll also have a virtual group. People who are not in a place where there's going to be a group meeting will be able to join virtually and also be in a group with other people virtually for breakout sessions. You can also go to this link down here, mussarinstitute.org/Jewish-spirituality-challenge. But you can just go to our homepage as well. It's easier, and you will find it there. You'll find all the information. If you are a Mussar facilitator and you're interested in facilitating a group for this day where you live, please be in touch with us, and we'd be happy to talk to you a little bit more what that's about. So it will be a global day of learning, people all over the world. You can see some of the locations we know about. I know Henry and Marga just sent a message by chat saying hello. And as I said, since we're running over time, an email will go out this week about our next webinar in the series, which will be Chapter 2 in Pirkei Avot. A save the date was already sent out, but the registration will open this week for that, and that as well as in March. So I think that's it. I'd like to thank you. Thanks to Rabbi Micha Berger. Thanks to Evan Silbert. And hope to see everybody very soon, and wishing everybody a great day. If you have any questions, you can email me at jeff@mussarinstitute.org. Look for the link to go out for today's recording. That will go out sometime tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody.